This video is about hydrometers, specific gravities, and calculating ABV. I'm Greg.
I'm Julie, and we're the Crafty Winers.
When you're making wine, it's extremely important that you track your wine must specific gravity, which is called SG, at points during fermentation using a hydrometer.
Excuse me while I actually read this because it's something straight out of a dictionary that he's making me say. So, glass hydrometers work based on the principle of buoyancy, which states that an object immersed in a fluid experiences an upward force equal to the weight of the displaced fluid. I hope you feel much more knowledgeable now after that.
So basically what that is saying is that the buoyancy of the fluid makes the glass hydrometer float higher or lower based on what particles are in that fluid, in this case.
So a glass hydrometer is what we use. It typically consists of a glass tube with a large weighted glass bulb on the bottom and a scale to read the measurement, and we'll go over that here in a little bit.
Looks like it's got gunpowder on the bottom, and I don't want her to drop it to find out if it really is. We'll just go on the theory that it really is gunpowder.
Well, now I'm nervous.
But these things do break easily, so don't try it at home, because you'll at least end up with a broken hydrometer.
And then you'll have to replace it. There are other ways of measuring specific gravity and ABV, such as electronic hydrometer, but we use the glass hydrometer.
So particles in the fluid that are heavier than water are going to cause that hydrometer to float higher in the fluid, and that gives a higher SG reading. So basically at the beginning of your winemaking process, it's going to be floating quite high in the fluid, and we're going to show you that here in a minute. And then hopefully at the end, when the fermentation is done, it's going to sink to where there's just a little bit of it hanging out of the fluid. And again, we're going to demonstrate that. Just hold on, and then we'll show it to you at the end of the video. Because in a wine must, which is juice that we're going to ferment, the particles in the fluid are almost always going to be just sugar. We can measure the amount of sugar that's present by the hydrometer reading. If you're in some other industry and you're dealing with other things that could be in your fluid, such as gunpowder, that's going to be what is going to be, and you wouldn't be measuring sugar, you'd be measuring gunpowder that is actually floating in the fluid, which I don't know if gunpowder floats.
You're really stuck on the gunpowder,
I'm going to try it. I'm going to have to try it when we're done with this.
We use, well, obviously this, and there's a scale here that you're not going to be able to read on this camera, so we've got a blown up version of it over here.
So yeah, reading these things, I have been staring at computer screens most of my life, and I can't see these very well because they're too close to my eyes. So what I do is use my camera and take a picture and then zoom in on the picture. And I also keep those pictures because if I ever question what the specific gravity was on my batch notes, which is what we just talked about, you can go back and look at that picture on the date that you added the entry to the batch note and confirm that you did have the right specific gravity. But for blind people like me, it's very nice to just use your camera, zoom in a little bit, and then zoom in on the picture, and you can see exactly where this level is. And again, we are going to demonstrate this. We're trying to get through the facts first, and then we're going to actually demonstrate us measuring specific gravity in water, sugar water, and then a finished wine.
I like how you just skipped over the blind part. He blames it all on working on a computer, but the fact is we're just getting old. Isn't age fun?
Yeah. So I have this graphic. This is a graphic that we just designed, and nobody has seen it until now.
Including me.
Basically, this shows the hydrometer, a picture of one that I actually took. So there's a little bit of a glare on it, unfortunately, but you can still read it. Over to the left, you can see what the specific gravity readings are. And then we've got another column here that's called pot alk. What that is potential alcohol. And if you look at the actual hydrometer, if you spin it around a little bit from where the SG readings are, you'll see that it's got a potential alcohol side to it. And basically what potential alcohol is is if the amounts of sugar that are in that fluid, if 100% of them got converted to alcohol during the fermentation, that's what that alcohol percentage would be. So in recipes, if it's important that you have a 15% final product, like we like on our Merlots, mid 14 or 15, you want to use that potential alcohol number to try to dial in and figure out how much sugar you're going to need to add to your must before you start fermentation. So the specific gravity, going back to our little chart here, specific gravities are always 4 digits long. The first digit is always going to be a 0 or a 1, and then there's going to be a decimal, and then there's going to be 3 numbers after that. And again, if you look at this, starting at the top, it goes from 0.990, and then all the way at the bottom here, most hydrometers go to like 1.160. So when you start your wine, it's going to start someplace in the middle, or probably a little bit south of the middle. When you're done with your wine, hopefully you're up here below 1, because 1 is the specific gravity of water. So anything heavier than water is going to be down here, and anything lighter than water, which alcohol is going to be up here. So when you start it, you're expecting there to be sugar that's going to push this down to a lower number. When you're done, you're hoping that it's going to be a higher number because the fluid is lighter than water because of the alcohol.
Bet you didn't think you were getting a science lesson today. We'll just call him Bill Nye the Science Guy. Or Bill, yeah, I don't know.
Is he still alive?
Yeah, he is, I'm pretty sure. I used to love that when I was a kid.
Okay, so each one of these little tick marks that you see on here is 0.002. So basically to read this, let's look at one of these here. Let's just look at the water that's 1.000. The tick that's underneath it is 1.002. Tick underneath that, 1.004, 1.006, 0.008, and then you see the 10 there, so that is 1.010. So every one of those ticks is 0.002. So what you do is you find the level of where the fluid is, and then take the number that you can see and add 2 for each tick until you get down to where the fluid is. And again, we're going to show you that.
There will be cases when you want to add fermentable sugar to the wine must to raise the specific gravity based on the particular recipe and the target ABV that you're after. For instance, when we're making our Merlot recipe, we target about a 1.110 specific gravity, which would be a potential alcohol of 14.2%, and that's kind of where we like to hit on our Merlots. So to accomplish this, you can dissolve about a half a cup of sugar into a gallon must to gain 1% potential alcohol. And we actually had to do this week on a batch of Merlot that we were working on, because the specific gravity was basically telling us that the potential alcohol level was going to be 10%, and we were trying to hit that 14.
And we don't do 10% wine.
We don't do 10%.
Gotta do 14, 15%. When you're adding sugar, do it sparingly, because if you get too much sugar in, if the yeast can't handle, let's say that we have yeast that will do 15% conversion, and you put more sugar in it than that, then you're going to end up with dry, sweet wine, and that may not be what you want. Sweet because there's sugar that was not converted to alcohol. So be very sparing when you add sugar to raise your potential alcohol, because you don't want to probably end up with something that's some kind of a hybrid. It might be a great hybrid, but it may not be what you're looking for. So just be sparing on the sugar. Because
taking sugar out is much harder than putting it in. You'd have to dilute the must, which really isn't the preferred thing to do. So.
No, because you're diluting your grape juice too. So.
Yeah, so we just did like a half a cup of sugar at a time,
so
until we hit where we wanted to be.
At the bottom here of our nice little handy hydrometer cheat sheet, you'll see some conversions that are in here for figuring out how much sugar you need to go from whatever your specific gravity is now to whatever you want it to be. So there are two different ways. One is measuring cups out, but because the sugar can be different size granules, it's usually better to use weight. So that's also here. I have always done the measuring part, and it's kind of a pain in addition to not being as accurate. So I'm trying to get used to doing the weight method. That's what we'll be showing you here in the video. Last thing I'll point out on this, and this is in a PDF, you can download it in the description below. You're welcome to share this, do whatever you want with it. We've got just a little thing that kind of reminds you that this area here is the range that you're going to be in after fermentation. This range down here is where you're going to be probably before fermentation. And then we also have just a little reminder, each one of those ticks is 0.002. It's amazing when you look through chat groups to see how many people misstate what their specific gravities were, because they're not in the habit of seeing this 4-digit decimal number and they don't read it correctly. So it's important. This cheat sheet might help you.
So we found that it's best to dissolve the sugar in a warm water mixture first, so it's liquid, and then pour it in to the must. You can pour it in as granulated sugar as well, but it just doesn't mix as well.
Yeah, then you may have a hard time mixing it.
Yeah. So like we said before, as the sugars are converted into alcohol by the yeast, the specific gravity will go down. So alcohol is lighter than water.
So
Yeah.
it goes down.
This causes the hydrometer to not be as buoyant in the fluid, and it will sit lower in the must when it's done fermenting.
So the specific gravity that you take with just the grape juice and the water, so the initial specific gravity that you take is called the initial gravity, or the IG. So when you see somebody saying IG, they're not talking about OG, Tom Brady, they're talking about IG, initial gravity. So when we take the IG reading, we usually take it after we add Fermento and any other additives that we're going to add. The little particles from Fermento and the other additives aren't going to really affect the IG very much. We do that because it's convenient. You don't need to do it that way, but that's how we do it.
So depending on the recipe, when you feel that the primary fermentation has been completed, you'll take an SG reading. A few days later, you take another reading, and if they are the same, fermentation has completed, or it could be stalled. We'll have a video specifically talking about that instance here later, and we'll come back and link it to this.
You'll know if it's stalled based on whether or not you hit close to your target, based on the amount of sugar that you added. If you targeted 15 and it's 10, most likely you're stalled. Something went wrong. If you targeted 15 and it's 14.8, if it stays the same, 2 different readings 3 days apart, it's done. It's going to be drinkable at 14.8. We would probably even lower ourselves to drink a 14.8.
I suppose. So if those aren't the same, you'll want to wait another day or two and take it again.
We just did a video about batch labels. Always make sure that you're writing, anytime you take a specific gravity, write it down. Write down the date what the specific gravity was. Again, the one that you take right after you put water into your grape juice and your additives, if you do it like us, is the IG, the initial gravity. Once your fermentation has ended, that last specific gravity is called the FG, the final gravity. And you have to have both of those gravities to come up with an accurate ABV, which is the percentage of alcohol.
For our Merlot, depending on the recipe, we're hoping for a final gravity of under 1.000, indicating that the fluid is lighter than water due to the alcohol. So thus is dry. For instance, if you achieved a 1.110 specific gravity, our Merlot recipe's target final gravity is 0.998.
Which is 14.5-ish alcohol percentage.
Which we're okay with.
So to calculate the ABV from your initial and final gravities, I'm going to give credit to City Steading Brewing, which we'll also link in the description below, who came up with this formula as far as I'm aware. you're going to take your ending gravity minus your starting gravity and multiply that times 135. There are other ways you'll find, like even the hydrometer had a formula on it, but City Steading's formula seems to work well. So I use it. I would suggest you use it. In our Merlot recipe, if you hit the targets of 1.110, which is the starting gravity, and the final gravity of 0.998, which is dry, the ABV would be 15.12%. So we would, again, if you do the math, I'm gonna put the math up here so that you can see how we came up with this. But that's how you calculate your ABV. Again, ending gravity subtracted from starting gravity times 135. It's pretty simple, and it's accurate. We're going to now show you an example of measuring with the hydrometer. Okay, so we have a gallon of Idaho water, tap water, and we're going to test the specific gravity of it. Well, how do I know that it's a gallon? Because I etched my jug at the gallon mark so that I don't have to have any questions about how much water is in it or whether or not I filled it up to a gallon.
Which we also have another video just on how to etch those marks into the gallons. We'll link that here too.
So I am going to be adding a pound of sugar. So there probably isn't room in here for a pound of sugar. I'm going to pour a little bit of this out. Better strategy when we're showing you the recipe for Merlot is to check your specific gravity before you fill this up to the gallon mark so that you can get an idea where your specific gravity is, add sugar to it, and not have to pour out any of your wine must. But we'll go over that when we go over get to the recipe stage. So I spun this to get the bubbles off because the bubbles will affect the buoyancy and will make it float higher and give you a bad reading. So spin it and then make sure that it's not touching the side, anything that can falsify the reading. And I can see that it is right at 1.100. I'm going to take a picture so I can show you. I believe I'm going to take a picture so I can show you. And in this picture you can see the 0.990, and then you see enough ticks to take it right down to 1.00, and it's floating right there. So again, my blind self, I zoom in on the picture that I took. I keep the picture, but the biggest reason that I do this is so that I can zoom in and see what the reading is. So now we're going to add a pound of sugar to this after taking a little of this water out so that it'll fit, and we're going to take another reading, and we're expecting that reading is going to be right around 1.040 with that pound of sugar that we add. So let's see how close we get.
Okay, so we added a full pound of granulated sugar to this gallon of water, and we're going to take another reading.
We're expecting this to be at 1.040 because that's what a pound of sugar should do, is raise it by 0.040, as you saw in our chart earlier. Let's see if it works. The laws of buoyancy.
Don't make me read that thing again. Though I feel a little smarter after reading
Did
that.
such a good job. Okay. It's floating.
That's good.
Spin it to get the bubbles off. And then we will take a picture with our camera so that we can see what it says. Right at about what we said. And this isn't, it's not exact. It's
Wait,
always good to come in a little bit less than.
Wait, it's science. It's not exact?
Yeah,
What the heck?
So maybe it's a theory of buoyancy, but no, there's going to be little differences between sugars. If you use the same brand, you probably will be able to make it more consistent. But I'm getting a picture here. I'm going to say 0.038.
It's pretty close.
It's kind of, in water, it's a little tougher to see. If I would have used tinted water for this demonstration, maybe it would be better. But again, the point is that it was just about 0.040 that it raised it by adding 1 pound of sugar to our 1 gallon water. So we're going to do one last thing. We're going to show you a wine that is just about done with secondary conditioning that has got a final gravity. We'll show you that real quick, and then we'll be off. Okay, so this is a batch that we started on the 13th of last month. This is a bourbon barrel Merlot.
Which, incidentally, is the most recent batch of what we're actually drinking right now. It's pretty good.
We noticed that there was some undissolved sugar at the bottom of our carboy, so that's probably why that was a little off. Or again, it could have been the
Brand of sugar.
Could have been the sugar.
It is great value. So
I do want to mention that we re-sanitized all of this before we did this because we don't want to stick a baster that's been in other stuff in our wine. So
no, we don't.
We re-sanitized everything. This wine is at about 11%. Was at about 11% before we infused it. So I don't actually know where it is right now at this particular moment. We're going to learn together.
Well, let's
so
find
I'm going
out.
to spin it. And it is definitely lighter than water, as we would expect. 0.96, maybe 7 is where this comes in. So
what does that calculate out to?
that ends up being, I'd have to take my original gravity and my final gravity and figure that out. But
Okay, well, I won't ask you to do that.
my note says 11%, but then we added some additives that had alcohol in them. So there you go. That is how you use a hydrometer. That's how you calculate ABV. Make sure you're putting all of these on your batch notes, like you'll see.
Right here?
Probably see right here. You can't read my cryptic writing. And you're probably wondering what this is. We'll go over that
Later.
We're not fishing. There aren't any fish in our wine, but we'll go over that at a later date.
So now you've had your science lesson and your math lesson. You should feel very educated.
So sanitized, we're not going to waste any of this delicious wine.
Absolutely not. We don't waste wine.
It's going right back.
That's
where it
alcohol
came.
abuse. We don't do that. So thank you guys for watching this informative video. I know that it's a little bit on the boring side, but it's super important information that sometimes is really hard to come by. So we wanted to do that for you guys because when we get into the later videos on recipes, we're going to assume that you already know all of this stuff, and if you don't, you always have a link to go back and brush up on all the important first steps before you get to the fun part, which is actually fermenting the wine and then, of course, drinking it afterwards. If you liked this video, please click like and feel free to leave us some comments about what you liked about the video. Anything else you'd like to see, we will respond to you. Please subscribe and tell us that you want all notifications on all of our videos, and you'll get to see all of them as we put them out. And again, thank you. We'll see you next time. Cheers.